everybody. This is Dave here at Pulp Alley, and today we're going to talk about a couple abilities. We're going to talk about the speedy ability and the winged ability. Now, we're also going to talk about how those abilities interact with other abilities as well. So, whether or not you're a new player or a longtime player, I think this is going to be good information for you to hear. So stick around for this one. This is, of course, about the Pulp Alley tabletop adventure game. Very cool game. So that's what we're talking about today. The speedy ability and the winged ability. So we're going to talk about speedy first. It's really very simple. It is a level 1 ability. So, just about any character can have it. Let's see. Speedy says you may move up to 16 inches instead of 12 inches. You just can't get any more straightforward than that. So instead of moving up to 12 inches, you can actually move up to 16 inches. When we're writing the rules for Pulp Alley, we try very hard to be very specific about it and what ability does. And very seldom are we going to talk about what an ability doesn't do, because that's just a rabbit hole that you can spend all day writing about what an ability doesn't do. So when we say that speedy allows you to move up to 16 inches instead of 12, that's really all it does. So when you start looking at combining it with other abilities and you say, well, I want to combine it with really any of those abilities that have the potential of slowing a character down, like armored or reanimated or unearthly, for example. So what happens when you pair speedy with one of those abilities? We'll just say armored. So when you look at what armored says, it says you cannot move over 6 inches unless you are rushing. So when those two abilities come together, neither one of them are discarded, and both of them do exactly what they say. So speedy allows your maximum distance is improved from 12 inches to 16 inches, and with armored, you cannot move over 6 inches unless you're rushing. So that's how it works. You still cannot move over 6 inches unless you are rushing. But if you are rushing an enemy character, then you could move a maximum of up to 16 inches. Not normally a good two abilities to stack, but we've done it. And we've also done it with some unearthly characters, making them either winged or speedy, just because it kind of makes sense with the type of character that we're doing. So, for example, if we had a character over here that is trying to run around and get to a plot point that's on the other side of the table here. So they're starting over here, and they're going to have to try and run around to try and get there, right? So over here is the plot point over here on this side. So all you do is they're basically measuring out 16 inches instead of 12. So as long as they don't have one of those slowing abilities, and instead of moving 12 inches, he moves 16 inches. Very, very simple. Very, very simple the way that ability works. Another thing that speedy allows you to do is it doesn't stop you from being able to shoot. Remember, you can move over 6 inches and still shoot. So that's one of the, I guess you'd say, one of the differences between speedy and winged. So let's talk about winged next. What winged does, and it's also a level 1 ability, and we'll just real quickly check it out here. You may fly up to 16 inches and ignore intervening terrain and characters. You cannot fly and shoot during the same activation when you are at ground level. So what that last little bit is talking about there, we're defining flying at ground level by that first sentence there, which is basically you may fly up to 16 inches and ignore intervening terrain and characters. So what that means is you could, instead of having it with speedy, you had to go around all of this. With the fly ability, you could actually just take off in a straight line and move straight across all of this stuff and end up, basically smack dab in this plot point. You could just fly, boom, like so. Now let's say that this area was a difficult area or something like that. Now, what would happen there is that you don't get to ignore the difficult area because it's not intervening. It is where you're actually landing. It's the end of your movement. So that is not intervening terrain. The intervening terrain was all of this other stuff and all these other characters along the way. Where you landed, you would still end up having to take your peril because you were moving fast when you entered that area. And we could say possibly that this dog is kind of nervous, and anybody that moves fast or whatever is going to possibly have to deal with the pooch if you come into that area. Maybe it's trying to defend Betty here. Winged is pretty good and has some advantages over being speedy, other than the fact that you cannot fly and shoot in the same activation. With speedy, you can still run really fast and shoot. When we were designing Pulp Alley originally, I was really thinking back to those old serials and stuff, the old pulps, and even the more modern stuff like Rocketeer. And in those sort of settings, flying wasn't really something that had a lot of nuance to it. It was you flip on the rocket, you're off. So it's not that sort of thing. Once we started working on the rules a little bit, we realized that players were going to want something that kind of had a little more finesse to it. And plus, there are things out there that do have a little more finesse to their flying. But you look at, like Captain Spectre. Captain Spectre really only uses his rocket pack and things like that to get to the adventure, or get to the story, and then it's not really used during the scenario, to put it in tabletop terms. So that's something that we kind of thought early on, but as we progressed through it, we kind of added in flying just so players would have some flying characters as well. It really depends on how you want to do your character, how you see them. Let's see. So we've also talked about the idea of combining Winged with one of those slow abilities, and it works exactly like with Speedy. It doesn't change anything. Both of the abilities still have what I would say is their full effect. Again, if you're a flying character and you're armored, then armored still matters and it still counts. So what it says is you cannot move over 6 inches unless you're rushing an enemy. And then that's where you could kick in with the winged ability, and it increases your maximum move up to 16 inches instead of that 6. But normally, if you're just kind of, you can kind of imagine that as something that moves a little bit slower, possibly stalking, and then when it's ready to go in for the kill, it zooms in. Let's see. The other thing about winged ability is that you have some optional rules at the back of the book, back here on page 114, where it gets into things like the different levels of the table. So normally what we're dealing with is what we call ground level. And that's basically the tabletop and the little bit of surface that we have here. It's not the high altitude stuff. So if you get into the optional rules, and you also have a level above the ground level called low altitude, there's a band there, and then you also have a level called high altitude. And so flying characters can actually leave the ground level and go up into low altitude or possibly even to high altitude. Can't change levels more than once per activation. If you're trying to rush or shoot at somebody that is at a different altitude, then you have to kind of take that into effect. It's pretty cool, and it's a lot of fun using some of those optional rules as well. Not going to get into all of them today. It's a really like 2 paragraphs, not a lot to go over. If you have any questions about flying, if you have any questions about winged, let us know. I'd also really like to know, is there an ability or abilities that you would like us to cover and give a little bit more in-depth look at? So recently we had somebody suggest impaired and hindered. So I think our next video, we are going to do that. So we'll take a look at hindered and impaired, and we may include some of the other disadvantage abilities like unlucky and impetuous and things like that as well. So let us know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to be a subscriber. Get subscribed to our little channel here. Hit that bell button so you get a notification when we upload a new video, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.